We're in the series right now called Relationship Reset. And one of the things that we said about this reset is that it actually takes resetting ourselves to be able to fix the relationships that are in our life. We have a tendency to think that it's important to change everyone else around us, but we really can't do that. What we can do is we can make changes in ourselves. Before we dive into the text today, I want to celebrate some stuff that is happening in the church. And one of the things that we did, we have this thing around grace. It's one of the arms of the church. It's called Grace Does Good. Grace Does Good. And Grace Does Good is one of the ways in which we bring good to Central Florida. We want to do that because we want to build the reputation of Jesus and the reputation of Christians as people who are caring and loving and kind and actually make a difference in our city. So Grace Does Good did something, and this is all predicated on the great generosity of this church. You guys, the way that you give towards the church has a massive and practical impact on the outcomes of things in the city. So let me tell you what we did this week. Tons of items were donated, including over 400 backpacks and over 1,700 clothing items. 10,000 pencils were donated, but only number 2 pencils, right? 301 kids received clothes, school supplies, and backpacks, including children from 60 foster families. Can we celebrate that? 50 haircuts were given. I wasn't one of them. Over 180 people volunteered for this. Pastors Josh and Pastors Nathan oversaw this, and together they walked 30,930 steps. So we got fit at the same time too. It was great. God showed up in a great way. And we say around here all the time, when we show up, that's right. When we show up, God shows up. So I want you to know that your giving makes a difference in the city of Orlando and in the surrounding suburbs and communities. And we're going to be doing lots and more of that. I have one other thing I want to celebrate with you. I am a pop-pop, and yeah. So I have been asking, or people have been asking for pictures, and that's Jordan. That's Jordan. It's my son, Connor, his wife, Kaylee, and that's Jordan. And she's at Lido Beach. She's living the good life right now, okay? But she came about a month early. And Jordan was 6 pounds in that picture. She is possibly the greatest child in history. So we're very grateful for all that God's done. So let's dive into our text today. Colossians chapter 3 says this: whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters. Since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward, it is the Lord Christ that you are serving. So let's take a look at verse 23 real quick here. It says, whatever you do. He doesn't give you a list of things to do. He says, whatever you find yourself doing. This category is exhaustive. It includes every context of engagement in your life. Whatever you are doing, he says, it includes everything. Bring your best. Bring your best in every single thing that you do. And I think sometimes there's a concept here that we miss, and that is, at times we need to realize that God shows up in our life, not just in the extraordinary moments of great worship on Sunday mornings, right? It is actually more than that. Monday mornings, the Lord can show up in your life. Tuesday mornings, Wednesday mornings, Friday evening, he can show up in your life. And a lot of that has to do with how intentional we are about the presence of the Lord in our life. Now, if we're gonna have the right relationships around us, it means we have to be the right relationships inside of us, right? So the relationship with Jesus on the inside of you should change the way that you interact with the world around you. So it's true. I mean, what we recognize is that there is a kind of holiness that comes not from extraordinary things, but from very ordinary things. I think it's true, and it may not feel as exciting, but I think you can find Jesus doing the dishes. Doing the lawn, got a couple amens over here. The lawn, the cleaning toilets, folding clothes, they're not holy in themselves. Nothing's holy about them until you bring the presence of the Lord to it. And anything we bring the presence of the Lord to, and anywhere we are where the presence of the Lord is, that is holy in that moment. And that could be a conversation that you have with your neighbor, or it could be anything that you're in the process of doing. So this last week, I watched a Japanese tea ceremony. Anybody ever seen that before? Raise your hands. Okay, a few. There's always a few in each service. But a Japanese tea service is really just the presentation of tea to someone else. It is an Near Eastern and even an ancient process whereby you show hospitality to the person that's with you, right? And there's a connection that takes place. But it can take 30 minutes to 2 hours to be able to do this. And it is precise, it is pristine. You can't just do it. You don't just go and pour tea. It is a whole ritual, a whole process. And it's designed specifically to make the one who's come to your home to feel special and honored because you've taken time to learn this for them and make them part of your hospitality. And it's just the opposite of what we often find ourselves doing, which is hurrying through life so fast that we're constantly having conversations with each other through text and then dividing our attention between this person and that person, right? Like, for example, Kelly and I were at Luke's Kitchen on Thursday night, and we go there every once in a while, and we were having a good time. She was on her telephone, and while I was talking to her, so rude. And, but anyway, when we got there, it was raining, right? And I just, like, I got some weird things about me, and this is one of them, right? Like, I don't mind getting wet by the rain if I'm wearing appropriate, gear, right? But if I'm dressed up a little bit, I hate when it rains on me. So that combined with this next thing that I'm about to tell you caused a challenge for us, right? And that is Kelly and I have a very different speed and pace of walking. Kelly walks like a geisha, right? Whereas I, in all seriousness, this is how I walk when I'm walking through a mall or anywhere else. Why? Because if you're going somewhere, get there, right? Why would you take more time to do that? Just get there, right? I drive the same way as well. So here we are, we're at Luke's, and we're kind of just sitting there. And I'm just getting out of the car, and so I start walking. And I'm trying to get, and I turn around, my wife is. And I'm like, oh. So I go back over, and she goes, just go. And I'm like, I can't just go. If anyone from Grace is here, sees me walking away from my wife in the rain, I'm just gonna look like a total jerk. So there I am, just kind of geishaing along with her as we get there. 25 minutes later, we sit down, and it's just one of those things. It's like, but there's just, doesn't that kind of just make you like itchy sometimes? Like when somebody is slower than you are? You could be driving down I-4 and all of a sudden, man, somebody's just like, their method of merging is a 30-mile-an-hour careful entry while I'm doing 80 and slamming on my brakes, right? It's just one of those things where I feel like we're in such a hurry. It's hard for me sometimes to slow down. I think it's hard for our culture to slow down. It feels weird. I remember halfway through the Japanese tea ceremony, and I remember thinking, not much has happened here. And it wasn't the point. The point was to intentionally be there to be able to honor the other person with your presence. And I think one of the interesting people I like to read about every once in a while is Sir Richard Branson. Now, he probably doesn't share our faith yet when we have conversation, maybe, okay? But he's a billionaire, and he's just this business guy, and he's got all kinds of, I think he said he built 60 different businesses all over the place. And it's interesting when people say about him when they come away from the conversation. They say that when you're in his presence, he doesn't have computers. He doesn't own a computer. Like his people own computers. He doesn't own any computers or anything like that, right? And so when people talk about being in his presence, they say this. They say, when I'm with Richard, I feel like I'm the only person in the world that matters to him. And it's because he brings all of himself to this moment. So whatever you do, you have to be present in that. To be present means that you and I are consistently and continually being intentional about the relationships and the work around us. So I want you to think about it like this. Verse 23 again, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart. So showing up actually is work. Everyone say work. The reason why it's work is because it's not natural for some of us. For some of us, we're going from one point to the next point. We're trying to get things done. And this is the definition of a mom. Moms are like, I got a limited amount of time. I got 6,000 children and 5 million requests. And I've got all this stuff going on, and I'm just trying to get from here to here. Totally get it. And then you've got the person who's working. She might be working, he might be working, and they're working just 90 hours trying to get everything done. And we're rushing, and we're missing. And he says, whatever you do, you've got to work at it with all your heart. What does that mean? So there are a couple of things that Paul could have done here in this text, and he does something very specifically. Number one, he could have used the Greek word cardia, which is where we get the word cardiac or heart, right? But instead of that, he uses the Greek phrase etsume, which is with all your heart, right? Etsume, etsuke. And so he uses this word because he wants to understand that the word heart has a tendency, cardia, has a tendency to be more emotions, whereas suke embodies all kinds of different things. And so when he's saying whatever you do, and he doesn't give us a list of here are some spiritual things you should do, he's saying at work on Monday morning, you bring all your heart with it, right? Why? Because we influence the culture around us when we're excellent at what we do. Nobody inspires anybody else when they're mediocre at what they do. And so whatever you do, you work with all your heart. And so all of your suke. So what does that look like? So if you go to the online etymology dictionary, etymology is the study of words and their meanings and their historical backgrounds, like where they came from, right? And this is what it says. It says Greek, so the GK up there on the screen, Greek psyche is the soul, the mind, the spirit, the breath, the life, the invisible animating principle or entity which occupies and directs the physical body. One of the things that I love about Paul, and I love about the philosophy that he's kind of rooted into this, is he's talking about something that I talked about like 5 weeks ago. Remember when I was talking to you about the brain and the mind, and I said the brain and the mind are two different things. Your brain is the physical apparatus that's in your head right now. But one day, all of us, if Jesus doesn't return in this life, all of us will die and live in a grave, die and be in a grave, and our bodies will deteriorate, including our brains. But we don't cease to exist. Our faith tells us that we go on. We don't just go on as some energy or some force. We go on with principal concepts of idea, relationships, and everything. Relationship continues with us into the next life. And so we are who we are. So when I say me, am I talking about my physical body? No, I'm connected to my physical body. My physical body is a part of me. But if I cut off my arm, I'm still me. If I lose both my arms and both my legs, I'm still me. Because me is not the physical part of who we are. We're separate in these ways. And the reason why that's so important is because now you can understand that you're the one that's in charge of your body. It's not the other way around. Your body's not in charge of you. You get to choose that. Now, your body can influence you, right? Just go out there and eat 12 donuts. Your body will tell you you're a moron, right? Like that. And it'll tell you that by saying, I feel depressed, I feel jittery, I'm very nervous. Why? Because these things are connected to each other, but your brain is what controls these things. So when Paul is writing, I want you to bring all of your heart to your work, to your relationships. He's saying, I want you to bring the soul. I want you to bring your mind. I want you to bring your spirit. We'll come back to breath in a second. Life and the invisible principle, which is what's inside of us, the entity, me, which occupies and directs the physical body. Paul intentionally chose these words to communicate something very, very important to us. And that was that the soul and all of those other words that describe us is everything we're supposed to bring to the circumstances of our life. We don't bring part of ourselves. We're not half-hearted. We're all in. This word breath that he uses is really interesting because in the Old Testament, the story of mankind's creation begins with Adam. And God takes Adam and he creates him. He forms him from the dust of the earth. The only time the Bible ever says God forms him with his hands. From the dust of the earth, we are born. But when he creates him, he's a lifeless body until the Bible tells us that the Spirit of God comes over Adam and then breathes. And the word right there, the Hebrew word, is the word ruach, right? And ruach means breath, right? And he says he breathes the breath of God. As he breathes into him, Adam becomes a living nephesh, a soul, an animated person. So when he's saying this, Paul's really saying, I need you in every part of your life to bring the whole you there, not part of it. Not just a little bit of it, but every part of who you are. And then when I look in Bible dictionaries for this, the phrase ex psyches adds another component to this, and that is this. This implies the idea of enthusiasm and passion. Like we are supposed to be those kind of people. Why? Because as we look on the outside, as we communicate who we are to the world, so people see our God through that. When people see us as just depressed and anxious and worrisome, why would they want to be a follower of Jesus? Well, I don't know. I'm not sure why I'm a follower of Jesus. I just am, I grew up in it. It's not a thing. Like when we bring who we are, we bring passion, we bring excitement, we bring all of that together. And that challenges people and it challenges their norms. So if we live in a world that's constantly angry and you and I are filled with kindness and joy, which by the way is stronger than anger. Amen. Let me say it again, it's stronger than anger. Amen. Okay? And when you understand that and you live in that, you know that that influences the people around you. And by the way, it rebounds onto you. When you are kind, you feel better. Just like when you're angry, you feel worse. So there are a couple of ways. Paul's teaching on life here is more about what we are becoming than how to become it. right? And so let's talk about these. These are two different things. Knowing what to do is about wisdom. Knowing what to do is about, knowing how to do something is about knowledge. So knowing what to do about something, what should I do in this situation, right, is very important. But often when you and I wanna make changes in our life, we skip the what question and we go directly to the how question. So we ask ourselves questions like these. We ask questions like, how do I become more responsible? How do I make a lot of money? How do I get these kids in line? How do I get into the right neighborhood? How do I find love? Now, these aren't bad questions. They're really not. These are questions that I think at some point, all of us ask these and many other questions. These are not bad questions. They're just how-to questions. The problem with a how-to question when we start with this is that we undermine our ability to change by starting here instead of starting not with how, but with what. And this is, I think, the most important question that you can ever ask yourself. And it's not, what do I want? It is, what does God want me to become? What does God want me to become? I think when you answer the what question of identity, what does God want me to become, all of a sudden now the how questions begin to fall in line. Let's go back to the how questions real quick. When I became a Christian, things started to pop in for me. Why? Because now I understood that instead of asking the how questions, like how do I become more responsible, I answered the question of what does God want me to be? Number one, he wanted me to be a follower of Jesus. Number two, he wanted me to be a mature man, and I have to be responsible to be that person. How do I make a lot of money? Is this a bad question? No, it's really not a bad question, right? The Bible says those who seek to get rich quick often fall into traps. Those who love money fall into many temptations, right? But there's nothing wrong with having money, but you have to have money. If you start with how, you end up empty inside. I know some tremendously wealthy people who have no sense of their identity. They don't know who they are, so they don't know what to do with their money. They just hold on to it and are afraid. How do I get these kids in line? Well, as you're a Christian, you do it because you do it out of the way that you've been forgiven. We forgive others as we have been forgiven. How have we been forgiven? Over and over and over again. We're more gentle with our children. We're more kind with our children because the Father in heaven has been gentle and kind to us. Right? How do I get into the right neighborhood? Man, like when you become a follower of Jesus, you have to ask yourself, is this even important anymore? Maybe the right neighborhood is to go into a mission neighborhood that is super poor where you can share the gospel. How do I find love? Well, you find love with somebody who follows Jesus like you follow Jesus. When you answer the what does God want me to become question, it begins to solve a lot of these other how-to questions. It begins to put things into a proper context for us. So there is a difference between wisdom and knowledge, but these things are absolutely necessary for us to build a life, to have the right people around us, to build the life that God wants us to have. Proverbs 24, 3 and 4, before you put that up there, when I first became a Christian, I was living the life of a fool. And so a pastor came along and he said, hey, Mike, you would really, really prosper if you read Proverbs. Proverbs is one of the books of wisdom in the Bible, and it's essential for you to understand what's going on in there. And as many of you know, my father was an alcoholic, very, very violent with us growing up, and we just basically lived in a world of threats and fear all the time. Now, what I would say is this, is that when I opened the book of Proverbs, chapters 1 and 2, it starts like this, and it was God's amazing gift to me. It starts like this in chapters 1 and 2. It is a father speaking to his son and teaching him about wisdom. In that moment, I just knew God was speaking right to me. I knew he was like, I want you to know these things. I want you to understand these things, because in understanding these things, the trajectory of your life, which was downward, will now be upward in a totally different way. And that's true for you right now, regardless of whether or not you're 60 or 16. The reality is age is not a function of maturity. I've seen many, many old fools, and I've seen many, many young, wise students. So let's check it out. Proverbs chapter 24, verses 3 and 4 says this: by wisdom, a house is built, and through understanding, it is established. Through knowledge, its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. Well, let's talk about these three things: wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. These three things are necessary for us to build a house. Now, just so you know, don't be overly literal in this, because the Proverbs are not always literal. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. In this case, it's not talking about building a structure. It's not talking about building a place that you live inside of. What it's talking about is building a name. By wisdom, a great name is built. So let's talk about that. For some of us, there's two things that I think there's two opportunities for us. Number one, is to build a name. You've got to build one. And I want to talk to the guys in the room right now because I think women kind of get this a little bit better just by nature. But I think, guys, we have to understand this. When we build a house, we have to build it on wisdom, right? Not just knowledge. Don't go directly to the how do I get rich thing. Because if you do that, what's going to happen is what's on the inside will not be developed. And so when something hard comes along, bam, you're gonna get imploded on. Why? Because you don't have the right stuff on the inside of you. By wisdom, a great name is built. So for some of us, you just need to build your name. And what does that mean? It's like what the Bible says in another part in the Proverbs. It says that a good name is better than silver and gold. It's worth more than anything else. A great name is better. Some of us, though, we have to not start with building a name. We have to renovate a name that's been destroyed. And for me, my father was a businessman here in Orlando, and I even remember at his funeral, I remember people going, yeah, he was a lot. You know, there's a term for that I can't say here, but everyone was basically saying my dad was not an easy person to be around. He was a challenging person, and it was just, there were just a few people there. And I remember thinking, like, I don't want that to be my situation. I don't want that to be our name. And so what happened was we started working and changing. There was this one moment in the previous church that I was a part of. I was teaching thousands of people were in the room. And my father was not a Christian. By God's grace, he became a Christian in the last 6 months of his life. God allowed me to be able to bring him to Christ, which is amazing. But I'm sitting there, I'm teaching, and I invited him to church, and I invited him all the time, and he finally came. And I was teaching, talking about the gospel, talking about hope, and he came up afterwards, and tears were streaming down in his face, and he said, now I know why I was created. And it was just for me to be able to do this. And it had an impact on his life. And what I knew when I first became a follower of Jesus is I needed wisdom. If I was going to renovate a name that was a bad name in Orlando, then I was going to have to turn the page and start doing different things. And a wise person is not wise for the sake of himself or herself. A wise person is wise for the sake of everyone else around them. Like, we are wise to be good to other people, to be strong for other people. By wisdom, a great reputation is built. And through understanding, it's established. Understanding is not totally different than wisdom. It builds on wisdom. If wisdom is what's necessary to build a great name, a reputation, then the next thing, understanding, establishes that reputation. And here's how that works. Understanding in the Bible has to do with seeing through circumstances, seeing through situations to the other side. A lot of people can do this. Some people can do this in financial markets. Some people can do this in real estate. Some people can do this in business. Some people can do this in medicine. Some people can do it in law. You're presented with a challenge, you see the other side of it. So what understanding does is when the world is going up and down like this all around us, and we're gonna see it more and more as we approach November, and all of this election stuff becomes dramatic and crazy, right? So as everything's going up and down like this, a person who is wise and has understanding sees through the situation to the other side, knowing that God is on the other side of the trouble. And God's always on the other side of the trouble. He's never, come on, we don't half-heartedly clap in the church, right? Come on. God is always on the other side of your trouble. He's there. What's good about that is all you have to do is you have to get through it, and he's present on the other side. So by wisdom, a great name is built, and through understanding, it's established, it's made secure. Why is it secure? Well, because as the world is doing this up and down thing, and you and I are like this, we're solid. We don't have to be afraid. And most of the anger in the world today, guys, is fear-based anger. And I'll tell you right now, I talked about this in a series 2 series ago, that fear is really, anger is not really an emotion. It's what I call a blocking emotion. And a blocking emotion basically allows you not to feel something other than anger, because anger feels strong. When the reality is, anger, 99.9% of the time, is just fear and worry. It's, I don't have control. I don't know how to do this. I don't know where to go. How's it going to end up? It's fear, guys. And so we don't need it. By wisdom, a great name is built, and through understanding, it's established. Through knowledge, its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. Knowledge is essential. And what he means by this is you've acquired the right information. Like, for example, if somebody came to me and said, Mike, I'm having trouble with my heart. I need to have heart surgery. Can you help? The answer would be, yes, I can pray for you. That's it. That's what I will do. And sometimes God heals and restores and great things are happening. But if he came and said, hey, could you help me? And I said, I could give it a try. I could cut you open and see what's going on. I don't know what's happening, but I don't have that specialized knowledge. I don't have that specialized knowledge. And because I don't have that specialized knowledge, I don't have rare and beautiful treasures. So because it takes time to develop rare and beautiful treasures because of the expert knowledge you have. Some of you, again, great at real estate. You built all kinds of big real estate things. You're doing all kinds of great things in the world. It's great, but you do that because you have knowledge other people don't have. Some of you are great at sales. Your personality is a form of knowledge that you have that allows you to build rapport with someone else that's powerful and expressive and makes huge differences in your life. By wisdom, a great reputation is built. Through understanding, seeing through problems to the other side, knowing God's on them, understanding is present. And then through knowledge, God brings all kinds of wonderful blessings into your life. First, we have to start with the question of identity. And guys, I've never obviously been a wife before, but I hope that's obvious, okay? But here's the thing. I would think one of the hardest things for a wife to have to be in submission to a man is when he is one way on the outside and another way at home. So if we're gonna build a name, guys, it starts with our wives. It starts with our children. And here's the reason why. When everything is solid at home and you build the inside first before building the outside, when the wind comes and the trials come and the hardships come, we've got team. We talk about it at our house all the time. It's Team Adkins. We talk about it all the time. Like when the winds blow and the hard things happen, but we'll watch the opposite of this. If on the inside, everything's chaotic and falling apart, but you have a beautiful outside, a facade that everyone from the outside goes, your family's so wonderful, everything's great. This is what Instagram specializes in. No one takes a picture of Burger King, a Burger King meal. No one does that. They don't go, look at this burger. No one does that. It's just flame broiled. That's all it is. Like it's nothing special about it, right? But when you go to Instagram, everyone's dining at 5-star restaurants all the time. No, it's not true. It's just a facade on the outside that makes everything look good. The problem is that facade is easily knocked down when home and everything else is falling apart. Guys, we have to start, ladies, we have to start with each other, that we respect one another. And as we respect one another and love one another and care for one another, we can build a great house. We can build a great name, and we can build for the future. Proverbs gives us great wisdom. Look at it again. Proverbs 3:5 says this: through skillful and godly wisdom, a house, a life, a home, a family is built. What is meant by a house again? Our reputation, our reputation. Proverbs 3:3 says, and by understanding it's established. What is established? It's established on a good and solid foundation. Do you want that for your life? Then we have to work towards it. It has to be intentional. And as we work together as a family towards these things, things can radically change. I promise, I renovated my family's name. All the time when we're out in public, you guys are coming up and saying hi. And we went to Epcot Thursday or Friday night, and we were walking out, and Katie goes, "Oh, this is the greatest." And I was like, "Why?" And she goes, "You weren't recognized one time." You know, and it's just because people come up and say hi. I love it, by the way. It's all good. I'm a people person. Come up and say hi. But we rebuilt a reputation. And you know why? Because our goal as a family is to bring value and to bring help and hope to Central Florida. And so when we build for each other, it builds a reputation. It builds a name, and it builds a family as well. And to do that, you have to have specialized knowledge. And when you do, its rooms are filled with precious and pleasant things. Colossians 3:23, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters. I want to talk to you about this because the phrase human masters might be weird to our ears because we don't have human masters. We might have bosses. And so when you looked at that passage, you might have thought to yourself, well, this is how I'm supposed to treat people at work, and you're 100% correct. So I'm supposed to bring all that I am, whatever I'm doing at work, if I'm sharpening pencils, do it with all of your heart, right? As working for the Lord, not for human masters. But this was originally written in a context, and the context was written to slaves inside the Roman Empire, specifically to slaves that existed on the Italian peninsula within the Roman Empire. And the reason why that was important was because Paul's writing to a group of people that 40% of the population were slaves at the time of Jesus. And so when we talk about slaves, we're not talking about like colonial slavery like we had, which is white and black. What we were talking about there is not based on race at all. You could actually be a Roman citizen, not pay your debts and fall behind and then fall into slavery, you and your whole family. I mean, it was Greeks, it was Jews, it was Romans, it was everybody that could be a slave. And it was based off of this nation conquered this nation, and as a result, everyone became a slave to the next nation. That's how that worked back then, right? So why this is so encouraging for people in the first century should be encouraging for us as well is this, that whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as you're working for the Lord, not for your slave master. Next verse. Whatever you do, work it out with all your heart, working for the Lord, not for you, since you know that you'll receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. So what he's saying right there is this: you don't work for the man. You don't work for the man. Remember, you work for the Lord Jesus Christ. This was setting people free in the first century from feeling like slaves because they knew they could see through it to something bigger on the other side, and that was the Lord Jesus. One thing to address on this is clearly, we always want to say slavery of any kind and every kind is morally reprehensible and horrifying. We also want to say this, because I see this on TikTok and I see this on Instagram every once in a while. When somebody dumb is reading the Bible, doesn't understand it, they'll say the Bible endorses slavery. It does not ever, never does, not one. But what it does do is it recognizes that they lived within a context that could not be changed overnight. And so they were helping people deal in the middle of a context that wasn't going to change overnight. But you know what happened? Took a while, but generation after generation of followers of Jesus that were slaves, here's what they did. They served really, really well. And they served the next generation until they were free, until, watch this, the whole Roman Empire became followers of Jesus, including Constantine, the Roman emperor. 300 years it took. Change is slow sometimes, but the way we serve Central Florida has the same impact as this. The way we do this makes a massive difference in the lives of people. The priorities of knowing what God made you for is a massive difference in your life. 2 stories real quick. So one of the guys is in the room right now. One was in Saturday night. But the first guy came to Grace a few years ago from California. He's a top executive in his company. He's really, really great, very smart. I love smart people. He's a really great guy to listen to and talk with. Very, very kind as well. Well, anyway, he was here for a little while, and the company said, hey, I'm calling you back. We want you to come back to California. You're gonna take this massive position, and it's gonna be lots more money. It's gonna be lots more stuff and opportunities for you to move up down the road, and it's gonna be a great opportunity for you in your life. And he said, Mike, here's the thing. Grace has impacted my son, my daughter, my wife. And I said, okay, well, tell me, what are you gonna do? And he said, we're staying here. And he said, isn't that amazing? That is an amazing thing. He said, we're staying here. And why did he do that? Because he knew who he was and he knew who he wasn't. He didn't need more. He's got enough. He lives in Winter Park. He's all good. Like, he's fine. He doesn't need any more. But the world would often tell you, just keep pressing on. Keep running as fast as you can. Don't pay attention to anything else that's going on. And then the other guy sitting in the back of the room, I work out with him every once in a while. He shames me every time. And but he got recently invited to become like a major player in the company. He's in financial investments. And he got invited to be a major player, like president kind of thing, in the company that he's a part of. And this was a massive move, you guys. Big, big, big move for him, financially and everything else. But we were sitting there working out, and he's like, it's gonna take me away from my family. It's going to cause me to travel quite a bit. It's gonna open doors for me like no one else could. And I said, well, what do you wanna do? Who are you? And he answered that question, and he said, I'm gonna say no to it. And I told him, I said, listen, I don't think you saying no to this opportunity is gonna be no forever. I think, in fact, often when you say no to a great opportunity, someone above you sees that and goes, wow, they know who they are. And they'll give you bigger opportunities down the road. The Bible tells us that when we devote our life to Him, we will never be ashamed. We will never be ashamed. Build a great name, build a family, build a life, do it from the inside out, and God will show up and amazing things will happen. Amen? Amen.